Hey, folks, I have a great show today. Dom and Chris from the Sheep Farm podcast are with me, and we're going to, or I should say that Dom and Chris are going to take a deep dive into the Asher family. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Ashers, Jane Asher was Paul McCartney's girlfriend back in the 1960s. And for those of you who are familiar with the McCartney and Beatles conspiracy, it would be biological Paul's girlfriend going back to the 1960s, not Billy. Okay, so Dom and Chris, just a little background as to why you decided to jump into the Ashes. Why did you decide to take a look at them?
It's not a bad term, jump into the ashes. Especially for where we all are at the moment. I'll climb out of the ashes, one of the two. The reason is we've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years a series called The Huxley's Brave New World Order. So we've covered quite a lot of characters within the Huxley family. We've done the genealogy of Aldous Huxley and a lot of the other characters. We did 3 episodes of George Orwell, did his genealogy as well, and all the people that surrounded him. And because they were on the Beatles album, or sorry, Aldous Huxley was on the Beatles album, I thought, shall I do some research on every single individual who was on that album? And then I got to thinking, maybe I need to do everyone who was actually in the periphery of the Beatles as well. I never thought I'd be doing Beatles research, by the way.
Oh, welcome to the club.
I'm sure you've heard that before. I'm not a fan of the Beatles. I don't hate the Beatles music or anything like that.
Right.
It's not. I've not come at it like that. It's a pure clean slate to look at. And Jane Asher really sort of caught my eye, really, because the whole phenomenon around her family is quite interesting. So that's the real reason why she just jumped out. I don't know if you find this, Mike, but sort of research seems to find you as an individual.
Yes. Yeah, that's what happens. In fact, Mark Devlin and we did a show back on the 28th, 2 days ago. We talked about his book, No One's Dad.
I just
No one
started
does a
listening to
plumber.
that. Just started listening to that today, Mike, actually.
Yeah, well, and we talked about that too, how you get into the research and information comes your way. And it's really, there's like a synchronicity that goes along with it. That's how I describe it. And because people have, even Mark brought it up yesterday, he said, well, you mentioned a couple of times over the 8 years that you were going to conclude and close out the research, which was my full intent. But what happened was every time I got close to thinking that I was going to pack it up, something significant came along. And then I had to make a decision. All right, do I really close the door on this thing, or do I take a dive into this and take a look at where this goes? So, and that's how it works. And for those who are not familiar with research, that's how it works.
Mm.
So,
It's a little bit like writing a song, really, or a poem or something like that. You get inspired by something probably that isn't that tangible to most people,
right.
and it just takes you in that direction, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think I think we found as well, Dom, didn't we, that the Huxleys, along with the Beatles stuff that you do, Mike, it tied into a lot of the social engineering stuff, obviously, and it all just came into one. It all just turns into one big mass of social
Yeah.
engineering, really, doesn't it?
I think we're up to about 20 odd hours of I think this will be the 10th episode, this Ashes to Ashes one. So we're up to about 20 hours of. I've done them in a documentary format. The Huxley Brave New World Order.
Okay.
We did quite a lot on the Doors as well, which seemed to link. It's very similar to the Beatles.
Yeah,
Social engineering.
what I call that the Doors of Deception, because obviously
Yeah.
the Doors were named after Aldous Huxley's book. I'm just writing another one actually called The Doors of Conception, which is about all their genealogy. What I found is John Densmore goes back to ancient Vikings and Welsh royalty. I know it's not surprising anymore, but and Jim Morrison goes all the way back through the Sinclair or Sanclair family, which they wrote the Scottish Rites of Freemasonry, and emanates from Vikings, ancient Viking kings, that were called basically the lizard kings.
Really?
Yeah,
Well, you know, Tom,
ancient.
that's all coincidence, though.
Yeah. There's too many coincidences. A big stack of
I
coincidences.
know. You don't
Like
have
Mount
to tell
Everest.
me.
Yeah.
that means Jimmy must have known them because he called himself Lizard King, didn't he?
Yeah,
So he must.
yeah.
Oh dear.
It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing what you find when you start to look under the hood.
Yeah.
It really
It's a
is.
bit like I found a Viking that George Bush was related to, and he was called, let me get this right, Rollo Ralverston or something like that. I probably destroyed that name, but his nickname was the Walker, and
Okay.
he was George Bush's great whatever grandfather, George Walker Bush.
Right. Yeah.
Another coincidence.
It's unreal. It's unbelievable.
Mm.
And try to get people to understand it and to get on board with all of this stuff is difficult. But we're not going to stop
No,
I
trying.
no.
told my mother-in-law, Mike, that we were talking to today. She's a massive Beatles fan. We're around her house at the weekend. She's got books everywhere, a Life magazine on the Beatles. She's got all this stuff.
Chris is
And
going
I
to
just
destroy
meant,
you, innit?
I know. I said, oh, so you should. We're speaking to someone about the Beatles, and she said, "Oh, right. What's the conspiracy then?" I said, well, "I didn't mention the Paul is dead stuff. I just said that they're a manufactured band." And she said, "No, they're not. I've listened to them since I was a kid." I said, "Well, the fellow we're talking to, Mike, he's also a massive Beatles fan, but he's accepted that they're a manufactured band, and he's done loads of hours of research and shows on it. No, no, no. I used to have Beatles wallpaper when I was a kid." Right. Okay. That's right.
Okay, Mom, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I said,
You
pointed a
got the
few more things
wallpaper.
out. And all she kept saying was, "Right, I had Beatle wallpaper when I was a kid." Yeah, but that's irrelevant to the case.
Well, I think what we're going to find later on, just to take it down another dark alley, is the people that own the merchandising also had their own Masonic lodge.
Is that
Probably
right?
Yeah,
little Masonic sign on a Beatles wallpaper,
yeah,
probably.
yeah. Yeah. Anyway, it's a crazy story, really, and there's too many links to all of it for going back to what you just said, Mike, for it to be a coincidence.
Yeah, yeah. It's very few people really understand it,
Yeah.
honestly. When you lay it up against the entirety of the population,
Yeah. Very small percentage.
very, very small percentage.
And it's even difficult for us to understand, if you like, what it's there for, because it's like you're reading computer coding sometimes.
Yes. Yep. That's like when I first got into the numerology. I didn't really know anything about numerology. I mean, I knew what it was conceptually, but I kept getting hammered with it. Every time I would go in and do the research, I'd find the numbers. Then finally, I'm like, okay, like we spoke about before in the last show, it's pattern recognition. So you start seeing the patterns, and you have to understand, why does it keep popping up?
Yeah.
So it is it's a process of getting educated for us as well.
Yeah.
And I don't claim to know everything, and I'm prone to mistakes like everybody else. But but that's the journey. The journey is trying to figure this stuff out, and it's not easy because it's hidden from us. We're not supposed to know this stuff, so that's why sometimes it gets to be a little difficult to piece it together. But what you guys have done here with the Asher presentation is phenomenal.
Yeah. Bear in mind, this is only part one.
Well, when you're ready with part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10,
Yeah.
just let me know, and we'll do this show, because I find this stuff personally, I find it fascinating.
So do I. Yeah.
That's the bottom line, isn't it, Mike? It's fascinating.
It is. It's fascinating. So, what I'm going to do, Dom, if this is okay, I will bring up your charts, and you just tell me when to stick on a chart and when to move to the next chart, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
well-
let me see if I can do that now without botching this up. Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah, can you? Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we'll go to the second chart. Obviously, this is probably going to be an abbreviated presentation, because we're going to chat around the areas. Otherwise, we'll be here all night. I just want to reiterate that I'm open to constructive criticism. I always am, but it has to be constructive. It's not, ah, you're wrong because of X, Y, Z. Come up with, you need to tell me why this angle's not quite right for you. I'm always open to updating any sort of research. It'd be sort of some sort of alternative peer review, wouldn't it? I suppose.
Yeah.
We're all amateurs, really, at the end of the day. But I think you'll find after this that the organic story of Jane Asher as just the organic girlfriend of Paul McCartney 1 is starting to look a little orchestrated. I don't know about you, Mike, but the signs that me and Chris always come across, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but there's several things that seem to run through all these characters. Like we call it Blackpool Rock. Do you know the rock? You guys will call it candy, where it's got writing in the middle when you snap it in half. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you get that. Yeah. Anyway, it sort of runs through the DNA of all this research. Evidence of childhood trauma, possible physical, sexual, psychological, or financial. Nepotism. Obviously, a lot of these people are getting helped up the ladder. Ideologies, eugenics, population control, Darwinism, transhumanism, etc., etc. Links to intelligence agencies. The numbers, as we've just been talking about, symbology. Before we go on, in this presentation, the numbers 1957, 57, and 5 and 7 seem to appear constantly through it.
Yeah.
I know we were talking via email, and you'd done a bit of work on that, I think, Mike, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, 5 and 7 sums to 12, and 12 is a very important number in the occult and numerology. It reduces down to 3, and it also represents the triple sevens, because 12 in reverse is 21. Triple sevens goes back to Aleister Crowley. So they're very creative with how they present their numbers. Very creative. People will ask me sometimes, well, this seems like it's not as black and white as some people would like it to be. They just want it to be one way or the other. And I try to explain to them that it just doesn't work that way. It's not binary. It's not black and white. In fact, they can use numbers that will result in multiple results. And they use the numbers to communicate out. It's their way of communicating within their inner circle. That's what the numbers are used for, along with numbers in the occult being viewed as very powerful as far as adding to the power of a particular ritual. So
So
that's
you're saying these are spells, if you like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's strange, because although my wife's into this stuff, she's obviously not into it like, say, me and Chris is. But it's the numbers that got her. She's from a sort of financial background, so numbers stood out, especially when I played a lot of your stuff going back into 2020. It was the numbers that fell into place for her.
Right.
Because she was partially awake. She didn't want to look into it because she knew it'd be a rabbit hole. But the numbers slapped around the face, and I've heard a few people like that as well.
Yeah. Well, numbers are very important in the occult. I get pushback from people. They don't think so. They don't think the numbers really mean anything. They just think numbers are when you go to the supermarket and you buy something and you get change. I said, no, 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 no. I mean, their dates and their timestamps and all of that is very, very important. As an example, not to drag this out, but with the Beatles' first 7 albums, with the exception of their third album, A Hard Day's Night, there were 14 tracks on the albums, 7 songs aside. That's representative of the number 77, which goes back to Crowley, and it goes back to his book 77. Book 77 talks about how one should apply their true and pure will. So these are the types of ways that they insert the numbers into their really into their presentations and into their products, if I can kind of put it that way. And also when we engage with that presentation or that product, be it the music or whatever, in the minds of the occultists, that attention or that focus is something that they're seeking. That consciousness and that attachment to whatever it is that they have put out, which is occulted, they view that as significantly enhancing their rituals, making it more powerful.
I call it the Monsters Inc.
Yes.
paradigm where
Hmm.
they're draining energy from us.
Yes, exactly right.
Um,
Exactly.
am I right in thinking that the number 57 is classed as the angel number for? I mean, that probably links to.
I
Anyway,
would
that's
have to
where
go back and take a
yeah,
look.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's my limited knowledge of numbers, by the way. Numbers aren't my thing. Chris is more into that side of it.
Well, the number
Oh,
57 is interesting because the number 5 by itself is comprised of 1 plus 4 or 14. 14 is 7 and 7, 7 plus 7. And then you have the number 7 by itself. Now, the number 7 represents perfection. It represents
Okay.
um, expanded consciousness or perfection at the human level, where in the Kabbalah, the number 8 is perfection at God's level. So the number 7 is below the number 8. The number 7 is all around the Beatles, along with other very important numbers like 3, 6, 9, 11, 33, and so on. But the number 7 is very prominent around the Beatles.
Well, it's going to pop up quite a lot, and also we're going to see a lot of ties to secret societies, satanic groups, Masonic memberships. Not just Masonic memberships, but we'll see that Jane Asher's four ancestors actually have lodges named after them.
Okay.
Which is pretty important, I think. And also, they always have ties to royal or ancient or aristocratic or elite bloodlines as well.
Okay.
Yeah, go to the next slide if you can. Now, this is sort of troubling, as I would say. The Asher Elliot bloodline has all them points that we just mentioned. You know, all the 7 points there, the links that normally appear. Maybe some people have got one or two of them. The Bush family have them all, and the Johnsons have Boris Johnson's family have them all as well. Some kind of trauma, etc. I think over the years I've heard you mention that the Beatles are steeped in Masonic symbolism. Certainly, when I've watched a lot of your presentations, you've spoken about it. And Jane Asher and her family, the Elliot family mainly, are also steeped in Masonic connections and symbolism as well. Do you think these people are sort of tagged and followed from birth, Mike? It seems that way to me. Or to me,
Yeah,
Chris.
I'm of the opinion that those that have these bloodlines are tapped early on, and they are positioned for positions of influence as they make their way into adulthood, even starting as a child. So I mentioned this about Billy as well because Stacy traced his bloodline back to the Douglas Hamiltons and the Percy bloodline, Percy being his mother's bloodline. And was he tapped originally? Was he being groomed and handled to lead the Beatles? I don't know, but was he being groomed and handled to have a position of influence, an important position in society? I believe that to be true. So I don't think it would be any different for the Ashes, and the Ashes have a very, very close tie, as we all know, because we're doing this presentation into the Beatles.
What some of the interesting stuff is Jane Asher. To me, she looked like one of those typical English roses type of thing. You'd expect her, if you went back in time, to be some kind of princess, if you like. And she looked, like Lady Diana. And she had red hair. Diana was the lady in red. And they both share the same bloodline to Christa Berg, who wrote the song, by the way. Which is another one of those weird connections. And she also shares a common ancestor with the Huxleys. So back to King Edward III. So that's
Okay.
another tie in there. But she also shares that common ancestry with Lewis Carroll, who she played Alice in the film looking through Alice Through the Looking Glass. And she shares a common ancestor with Lewis Carroll or Charles Ludwig Dodgson.
Now that's very interesting. And the Beatles themselves, Billy, Paul McCartney, and John Lennon talked a lot about how Lewis Carroll was a huge influence to them.
Yeah. And I think Chris did some research on the director of that actual film, and there's some strange stories about that film, isn't there, Chris? About the
Well,
director, anyway.
it just caught my attention. I just thought I'd look at the guy who directed this Through the Looking Glass for Jane Asher, Douglas Cleverdon, and he was a English radio producer and a bookseller and a publisher. Again, going back in time when the social engineers now are like film directors and music, you see publishing come up quite a lot, and the art world. But he went to Oxford, and the one thing that stuck out the most, he was buried in Highgate Cemetery as well, which is quite a high up. You won't know that, might be over here. It's quite a high up cemetery in London, in Highgate, and he was known to be associated with numerous leading cultural figures, and he set up a bookshop in Bristol. And this is what the interesting part was. The first book he published was a book of prints by Eric Gill, and Eric Gill, you probably don't know this, I might, but in the BBC in England, there's a series of statues outside the BBC offices, and they were done by Eric Gill. And then it came out that Eric Gill was actually done for being a paedophile. He apparently molested his 2 daughters and his dog. So there was quite an uproar, mainly during the nonsense, and people went and defamed and like, did they try to chisel it down? I think they tried to chisel it down.
They cut it down with a still saw.
They cut it down, right?
A guy went down, yeah. A guy actually cut it down.
They cut the whole thing down.
The irony is, this week they've actually put it back, and they've put a perspex cover around it. The BBC, who are known for all this type of nonsense going on.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that either. Yeah. But he was also part of the Fabian Society. This guy, sculptor. This is Eric Gill, sculptor, letterer, typeface designer. He won loads of awards and accolades for typeface design. Which, again, going back to when he was around, which was 1882 to 1940. That would have been, making typeface would have been quite a big thing. Letterheads and things like that. He was a sculptor, letter cutter, typographer, designer, and printmaker. Greatest artist and craftsman, he was called. He was referred to as a genius. Then, like I said, he sexually abused his daughter and his dog, weirdly. Member of the Fabian Society, Third Order of St. Dominic, another club of that kind of thing. Created. Oh, this is the interesting bit. And I only found this out today. He created several war memorials all around England for the First World War, and most of those are obelisks. But then I read up, and one of them was in Trumpington. Now, Mike, you won't know this, but I live in Trumpington, and I know where the obelisk is. It's just about 3 minutes from my house. I mean, I live in Cambridge in England, and Trumpington's a small village just south of Cambridge. Yeah, so I read that today and nearly fell off my chair.
So what we're basically saying there is the guy that made the film that Jane Asher was in, that was originally written by one of her cousins, if you like, Lewis Carroll, was best friends with this guy who was putting obelisks up and down the country.
And doing sculptures for the BBC. And also, Mike, BBC is 322 backwards.
Yeah.
And he went to school with another guy he met at Oxford, who was another poet, writer, broadcaster, poet laureate. I didn't even know what that meant. It's
laureate.
Laureate, sorry. Yeah, it means he'd been appointed by the monarch. So this other guy, his other friend, this John Bettengerman is called. He was taught by T.S. Eliot. Went to the Dragon School in Oxford. Was also taught by
what we're going to
C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, what we're going to find is that T.S. Eliot is a uncle of a relation of Jane Asher.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Margaret Elliott's one of his cousins. Yeah.
Well, one thing I did find, and I'll just mention this quick because it's kind of unrelated, but I'm going to use it. We'll use it in this Huxley stuff. Is his other friend Roger Fry was a painter and a critic, and he was part of the Bloomsbury group, and he was responsible for bringing modern art to England. Which, I mean, the influence of that to now, where the shite that we produce now labelled as modern art. And he started up a group called the Amiga Workshops. And it was a group that made these specific household items, carpets and rugs and pots and stuff, all just having the Amiga logo on there. I mean, I don't know what that means. Do you know what that means, Mike? And the address of it was 33 Fitzroy Square, London. That's where they operated from.
Of course it was.
Just as a side mention. But we'll go into that a bit more in this next
Well, he
couple.
was with the Fabian Society, you said, right?
Yeah, the Eric Gill, the
Yeah.
paedophile sculptor, yeah. And the sculptures, sorry, Mike, that are on the BBC, I had a look at them. I didn't realise there were three. And basically, the first one, the main one that I think that got cut down, it's of a bearded man to look like Jesus, I suppose. But he's holding a little kid, a naked kid, and he's got a flute, which made me think of Pied Piper. And
Pan,
then
yeah.
yeah, Pan. In every sculpture, there's a naked child or a naked boy, and a pan, a flute, and this is in the BBC, leading everyone astray.
It's
Or
just another
down,
coincidence, Chris.
just another coincidence. But yeah, Goris, so Fabian Society, Mike, you were going to say then?
Yeah, no, no. Every time we go through this stuff, when I talk to you guys, I talk to Mark, I talk to myself. We always, there's always this attachment to secret societies and symbols and these relationships connected to people that you would never think that that they're connected to. It's always that story, always.
Well, Aldous Huxley's family were the part of the co-founders of the Fabian Society. So it's
Full circle.
I didn't know that. Okay.
part of the family that they were married into, the Wedgwoods.
Okay.
Yeah,
The Pottery family in England,
Yeah,
they're famous for pottery.
Pottery family.
Which again sounds small, but Wedgwood in England, it was an entire Stoke-on-Trent, wasn't it?
Yes.
Was responsible for all the pottery in England, which is when before companies just there were hundreds of companies doing hundreds of things. One company would supply one thing. Sheffield would supply the steel. Stoke in England, that is right. Stoke was famous for pottery, and then it all kind of changed. Didn't it?
But
All these
that
industries have gone.
family became Barclays Bank.
Right.
But anyway, that's another story.
Better.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah. Can we have the next slide, Mike, please?
Yep.
So we've obviously heard you speak of this in the great book by
John Coleman.
John Coleman. Sorry, I'm going to call him Conley then. John Coleman has wrote about this, and we know that Chatham House is part of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, or Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. And if we just move to the next one, that next slide there is Prime Minister William Pitt, who was the first Earl of Chatham. And he is related to Jane Asher. So this is the first links into the Tavistock coding, if you like. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because in 1785, Edward James Eliot, first son of Lord Eliot, married Lady Harriet Pitt, sister of William Pitt the Younger, who served as Prime Minister of Great Britain from 1766 to 1768. And through the birth of their daughter, the two families are tied in blood forever, if you like. Edward James Eliot is an ancestor of Margaret Eliot, Jane Asher's mother. Is the first link, if you like, to back to Tavistock. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Chatham House, the Royal Institute, was founded in 1920. Am I right?
Something like that, yeah.
It's interesting because that's about the same time, well, Tavistock came into play after it transitioned from World War One, being the propaganda arm, right, for the British military. And also it's the same time period that the Frankfurt School came into being. So it's that period of time where a lot of these internationalist types of organizations really started to get some traction.
Right after World War, when everyone wasn't looking, and we just wanted to recover.
And Tavistock was spawned from Wellington House. I should say that.
Yeah. Jane Asher's, Richard Asher, I think his family emanates from Frankfurt, from Germany. So I think that'll be part of part two.
Yeah, well, Germany is really it's a hot spot for
the hub.
It's the hub.
Yeah.
The Rothschilds came out of Frankfurt, Germany.
The Rockefellers came out of Germany, probably out of Frankfurt as well.
And many of the Marxist intelligentsia
yes
came out of Germany. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of it. I know everyone says all roads lead to Rome, but I found with a lot of research, it does lead back. A lot of it leads back to Germany.
Yeah.
But yeah. So next slide, please.
Okay.
The Asher family lived at 57 Wimpole Street in London when Paul I lived there. They've lived there since they bought the house in 1957. Right, so we're seeing the links, yeah?
Yep.
When they moved from Great Portland Street in London. Now, I would say that the purchase of 57 Wimpole Street, if anybody's ever been to London and walked down these streets, this, even back in the days of 1957, it would have been an expensive area. And to buy a house on this, I'd have thought, looking at the houses there, the 4 or 5 story houses, they're quite big. And if you go to the next slide, Mike, you'll see the house. It'll show the house. So on the picture on that's the Royal Society of Medicine. So a lot of these properties on this road are all medical type backgrounds. We'll come to that in a sec. But the house there with the black door in the middle of those houses, just above the blue car,
Right here.
that is 57 Wimpole Street. That's where the Ashers lived. So you can see it's not a small house, that.
And then, like you said, Dom, it's in Westminster, which is, as London spread out and grown and grown, that was still the centre, even going back to that period of time. So it would have been an expensive house, wouldn't it?
I mean,
that
property there today would be tens of millions of pounds.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it was worth back then, but it says they bought the house then. So there was something going on financially, whether it would Margaret Elliott's family that was funding that. But I found that information's a site that's a proper Beatle mad site called BeatlesInLondon.com that sort of wrote about what year they moved into that house. So 1957, they moved into that house. And like I said, that number will just keep popping up all the time. Yeah, the next slide, please, Mike. So, Wimpole Street, this is where it got its name from. Wimpole Street, Marylebone, central London. Like Harley Street, Wimpole Street is associated with private medical practices. The actual name Wimpole comes from the Wimpole Estate in Cambridgeshire, near where Chris lives.
I've actually been there. I've been to that estate and had a look round the ground. I mean, it'd be interesting to go there now, maybe with a camera and take some pictures.
Yeah. In the 18th century, it was the seat of the Harley family, who developed all the Harley Street, Wimpole Street. They also developed several other streets. I think were Oxford Street and Cambridge Street as well, that they actually built and developed. The Wimpole estate sits in the National Trust. It's about 3,000 acres. The Wimpole, it's listed in the Domesday Book in 1086. And yeah, so that if we go to the next slide, we'll just go into a little bit of the Harley family. Go on, Chris.
Also, Dom, on the map, if you look at where that estate is, it's next to a village called Orwell.
Another coincidence.
I just thought I'd mention, because we thought we were discussing it today, and we thought maybe, I know there's a river Orwell, but I think that goes through Oxford. But there's actually a town called Orwell, little village called Orwell. It's got Orwell Church, Orwell this, Orwell that, all inside of there. Yeah.
We will find probably in the next episode that we'll show Jane Asher's genealogy with a direct ancestor to. They actually share an ancestor back to Edward III with George Orwell. It's the Earl of Westmoreland, and up in the north of England. So the next slide is the Harley family, and this is called the Harleian manuscripts after the family. And it's a collection of 7,660 manuscripts, including 2,200 illuminated manuscripts and 14,000 legal documents. And it's part of the Harleian Library, known as the Harley Collection, one of the closed collections, which I believe means you can't see it.
Closed collection, yeah. Harley's also a 33 in numerology.
Okay.
It was assembled by Robert Harley, 1st Earl of Oxford, aka Earl Mortimer, and his son, the 2nd Earl. And it was paid. It was bought in 1753 by the British government for £10,000, which I did some rough calculations, and that works. And somebody might correct me on this, but it works out. If they were buying it today, it'd be about £280 million.
Wow.
Now, if that's true, even if it's not, I mean, it's a bloody third of that. That's a lot of money in that day to buy some scrolls to hide them.
I would say
So
so.
I'd love to know what's in the scrolls there. So they come from, they're ancient scrolls from Western Europe, Britain, several Byzantine manuscripts in Greek and other languages, the Harleian genealogies of Old Welsh genealogies that are preserved at the British Library. They also feature Welsh royal families, which will show that Jane Asher is related to these royal families as well. Again, going back to the coincidence side, there's too much for it to be a coincidence. It has to be orchestrated in some way, doesn't it? It has
Yeah,
to
if
be.
you have one situation or two situations, you can say, okay, it's coincidence. But when it keeps popping up over and over again, that's not a coincidence anymore. Now, like we mentioned earlier before we started, now we have patterns that we have
Yeah.
to analyze.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing clear patterns.
I just want to talk about, if you go to the next slide, just talk about this chap. This is where the link to the Earls of Oxford come from for Jane. She's actually related to the people that built the street. All right. So, so that's the reason I'm pointing out Wimpole Street, because the Earls of Oxford, who at the time were the Harley family. Before the Harley family, the earldom was held by the House of De Vere, or the De Vere family, or De Vere, whichever one you want to call it. And they were the first Earls of Oxford, and they weren't just Masons; they had their own Masonic lodge in Nottingham. Those Masonic Harleian manuscripts that also featured ancient Welsh royal, we'll see that Jane's a descendant of them guys. Aubrey de Vere, the first Earl of Oxford, he's the 15th Earl, who I'm showing you there, but the first Earl is through the line that Jane Asher is related to the very same people that built 57 Wimpole Street that she ended up living in with Paul McCartney. But I pulled that picture out there. That's John de Vere, the 15th Earl of Oxford. He's got a Beatles haircut.
Yeah.
And that's Jane's 15th, I think it's 11th great grandfather.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So the De Vere family, or that De Vere there, was the esquire to the body of the funeral of Henry VII in 1509. Which is quite an important role when a royal family member's died. He was basically guarding the body, and he was appointed Earl of Oxford and appointed a knight as well for doing these things. And he was the Lord Chamberlain for life. Made another Knight of the Garter in 1527. So this guy's got quite a lot of noble orders after him. And he was there at a peace meeting between the King of France and King Henry VIII as well.
Okay.
That was called the Field of Cloth of Gold.
Yeah. I mean, this is classic blue blood stuff, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
But is it interesting? I mean, again, I find I'm just sad, but I find it interesting that why isn't anybody speaking that Jane Asher was living in a house with Paul McCartney, and it was built by her forebears? Why isn't that a news story? Why?
Why not? Because they didn't want anybody to know.
Yeah.
All of this stuff, as far as their bloodlines, they really do try to camouflage it as much as they possibly can. Right?
Yeah.
How was Jane Asher is portrayed to us as what? A pretty redhead actress. That was it. I mean, before you guys introduced me to her background, I knew nothing about her connections.
Yeah, neither did I. Like yourself, when you start researching this stuff, you don't know what you're going to uncover, do you? You lift the manual cover up, and you don't really know what's in there. But yeah, let's go to this next story about Wimpole Street. The Wimpole Street fire. It killed. Sorry, it. 10th of November 1935. I know. 10th of November 1935 at 6:30 a.m. there was a fire at 27 Wimpole Street where 5 people died. The fire was the catalyst to the UK's first emergency number that came into being on the 1st of July, 1937. The number was 999.
So what? That was used as an excuse to come up with the emergency 999.
That was
number?
part of, that was part. There was an act made of Parliament or something like that. It was spoken about, and this fire was brought into it.
Right, which is it's like when there's always a shenanigans behind the thing, isn't there? When they bring in a new law or a new, yeah.
Interesting. So, and everybody should know, 27 is 9. Triple nines is 27. That's 9. Triple sixes is 18. That's 9. Okay. And I mentioned 5 before, right? 5, 630.
630, yeah.
6 plus 3 is 9.
Yeah.
And 5 is, 1 plus 4, 77. So these are all occulted numbers, all of it.
At 10th of November, yeah, that's when the date were brought on at 6:30 a.m. Oh no, that's what the fire was. The 1st of July, 1937. That's when it was brought in. But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
That was very interesting.
Yeah. The next slide, please, Mike. A lot of things happening on Wimpole Street. So yeah, the Barretts of Wimpole Street, one of the most famous residents after the Ashes and Paul McCartney, associated was I'll get my teeth in. Wimpole Street was the poet Elizabeth Barrett, who lived at 50 Wimpole Street with her family. And in 1846, she eloped with Robert Browning, a famous English poet and playwright. He was noted for irony and characterization, so he was quite famous in his time. I mean, these are big things in the mid-1800s when you're a playwright and things like that. That's like going to the cinema or listening to a podcast or watching the news on TV. That's where people went, isn't it, to communicate things. But there are Beatles connections to this couple, by the way, which we're going to come on to in a bit. The street became famous based on a play of their courtship by Rudolf Wilhelm Bezier, who's a German guy, called The Barretts of Wimpole Street, which was written and released the play in 1930. He was friends with H.G. Wells, and H.G. Wells was mentored by Thomas Huxley, who was Aldous Huxley's grandfather, and H.G. Wells mentored Aldous Huxley. So, yeah. The play was about Elizabeth Barrett, whose father kept her a virtual prisoner in the house for most of her life. There were also 2 movies based on the story. The first one released on the 14th of September 1934. The second movie was released 17th of January 1957. The same year the Ashes moved into Wimpole Street.
Just noting as well, Ed, on the director of the first one, Sidney Franklin.
Right, go on.
Sidney Franklin School.
Oh, yeah.
That could be an actual coincidence
as well. Yeah,
could be an actual coincidence.
The movie plot: the disabled Elizabeth Barrett, adult daughter of Edward Moulton Barrett of Wimpole Street, and she has an intense interest in poetry. However, she lives under the obsessive rule of her father, who in fact shows clear incestuous tendencies towards her and discourages close contact with any males. When poet Robert Browning enters her life, matters are brought to a head through the intervention of Browning coming into her life, basically. In 1957, the film had a stellar cast, and the father was played by Sir John Gielgud, playing the incestuous Edward Moulton Barrett. And John Gielgud, it was one of the videos I wanted to play, Mike, that obviously when I was trying to set it up at my end, it didn't quite come off, but Sir Julian Huxley made a eugenics film in, let me get the year right, 1937, I think it was. And he talked about John Gielgud. Can you remember, Chris?
Yeah.
In that, where he was doing the genealogy, saying these people he was showing the family lines of why these people basically rise to the top in acting, set design, costume design, and basically all these families were all related to each other, and John Gielgud was one of them, ironically.
We're basically describing the whole entertainment industry from costume designer to set designer to actor. They all had to be intelligentsia, basically, didn't they? They had to be well bred. They had to be good breeding, basically, to be able to do that job.
Yeah. The next slide, please. This is where it links directly into the Beatles. So, John and Yoko were big fans, apparently, of Elizabeth Barrett and Robert Browning. I don't know if they were big fans prior. Well, it has to be after McCartney lived there. I would have thought, because he didn't meet Yoko until after McCartney lived there, the first McCartney anyway. So the song "Grow Old with Me" is apparently one of the final songs. I mean, you'll know this, Mike. I don't know. Written by John Lennon.
I know the song.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
It was recorded by Lennon as a demo in Bermuda, apparently. And apparently the song is dated to have been written on July the 5th, which is 57, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 57 reverse, right?
Yeah. In Fairyland, Bermuda. The song was released on the Milk and Honey album. It was rumored to be one of the songs that was planned, or it was penned for a possible reunion single. Now, whether that's true, I don't know.
Yeah.
The song inspired from two main sources: a poem by Robert Browning titled Rabbi Ben Ezra, and a song by Yoko Ono called Let Me Count the Ways. Yoko's song had been inspired by the before-mentioned Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poem, the Sonnets from Portuguese number 43.
Yeah, 7.
Yeah. The first line of Sonnets 43 has become one of the most famous English poems. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is where it gets a bit odd. Lennon and Yoko had for some time not only admired Robert and Elizabeth Browning, but John and Yoko thought they might be a reincarnation of the couple.
Really?
Yeah, really. Yeah. Apparently, that's the story. I'm not.
No, I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm shaking my head. It's just unbelievable.
All right. To like the poetry, I can understand that. Maybe write a song about that. Blah blah blah. But to think you're a reincarnation of everything that's gone on Wimpole Street with his friend Paul McCartney, etc., etc. Yeah,
Makes you wonder what's
really going on there.
what was there before Wimpole Street, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Just as a
energetically.
just as a side note, there's a new John and Oko film coming out called One to One.
I heard about it. Yeah.
Tethered to the only full length concert that John Lennon performed outside of the Beatles. They're keeping it alive, aren't they, Mike?
Well, they're going to keep doing it because, as I mentioned so many years ago, and there's going to be a ticker tape parade. In fact, the ticker tape parade is well underway. They're going to try to keep the Beatles alive and well in public awareness as much as they possibly can. And they are succeeding because it's everywhere. I mean, the ticker tape parade really started in 2009. That's when it really got legs, and it's been going strong now for since 2009. Was that 16 years? So yeah, they're going to keep going because the Beatles and are very important as far as being a main cog in the agenda to move it forward into the next age, Crowley's Aeon of Horus, or
I just had a little thought there. And maybe music is going to get that bad. It's going to get worse and worse and worse as it is. That there'll be a massive retro look back to the Beatles and have a massive research. I mean, we could be going years ahead, couldn't it? The way the resurgence, proper nostalgic look back,
it
even
could
more than it
be.
is now. Yeah.
It could be. I mean, with this, clearly what they're doing is to make sure they solidify the Beatles as an entity of worship.
Hmm.
And so that's, like I said, that's been well on its way for a long time. But I pegged 2009 as to when they really put the pedal to the metal. They stepped on the gas and they started turning out all kinds of stuff like Rock Band, the Beatles Rock Band. They released in 2009 the Past Masters with 33 tracks. I think it was the CD version in 2009. The Memoirs of Billy Shears came out in 2009.
Mhm.
And then we had a whole slew of stuff. We had Peter Jackson's documentary, we have the Hulu 321 documentary. I mean, it just never stops. They did the song Now and Then. That was going back about a year and a half ago. So, and I mean, this is off the top of my head. I'm sure if I went back and said what were major Beatle-oriented releases, whether it be books, recordings, or documentaries since 2009, we would get a pretty good list of things that they've been cranking out.
Well, from a marketing perspective, it's the ultimate marketing machine, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's just relentless,
yeah,
relentless, and the information's relentless as well.
yeah.
It's absolutely relentless. Next slide, please, Mike. We'll come to Margaret Asher now, or Margaret Elliott, as she's called. I think I've spelt her name there. It's one L, but anyway, never mind. She's got quite a royal ancestry coming from so many different directions that and we'll try and get to that if we do a part two. But the first ancestral line is from the Earl of Saint. I'm going to destroy this. Saint Germans or Germans. Again, we're coming back to why they're called Germans when they're called Elliot. But anyway, it's in the county of Cornwall, and it's a title of peerage in the UK that's held by the Elliot family. And as we'll see, that they've got close links to the royal families going back in time, many royal families, and it's I'd say a very important bloodline. And again, to say they've got Masonic connections is an understatement. Next slide, please, Mike. In fact, hang on a minute. I know you'll know all this, and I'm sure your listeners will, but just reiterate that Margaret Asher, or Elliot, best known student was George Martin. Again,
Right.
I can't reiterate, I can't get that in my head that, again, it's never really released out there. That's a big story, that. She taught George Martin music, who then, the guy who he was managing or writing the music for, producing the music, was living in their house going back 20 years forward. I mean, the coincidence of that happening, the chances of that happening, I'd like to put a bet on it anyway.
Well, that's the connection. It's out there that she was George Martin's music teacher, but it's presented in a very cursory way. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That's how it's presented. Oh, that's just so interesting and such a coincidence.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? But it's all connected, and it's very difficult for so many people to really come to grips with this. Because in order to have this, there has to be a long-term strategy and plan that's being implemented. In other words, people are being positioned to be in certain places at a certain time so that interactions take place and things happen. And that is not natural to most people, because most people don't have this kind of strategizing taking place in their life.
And we wouldn't put that type of effort or strategy into place to harm people or deceive people.
Right.
20, 30 years, 50 years in advance to do this, to put these chess pieces in place.
Well, it goes back to what I said earlier when we first started the show, Dom. They need to make sure that their people, their bloodlines, their associates are in place and where they need to be in order to control. You can't control if there are people in place that you can't trust, you don't know, that are not signed off, and they're not bought into the agenda.
Yeah, and he also played a part in, I think, Jane Asher. I think it might have been that film or another film that we just spoke about, the one that Jane Asher was Alice in, or it might have been another film. But George Martin did the music for one of them, so they knew. You're talking the 50s here, so they knew, they interacted throughout prior to her meeting. It weren't just George was taught music and then he didn't see them again. They interacted throughout. I think Matt Sergio found that information, that the part of he was doing the film score for a film that she was in. So they kept contact. Throughout this, I had the distinct feeling that maybe George Martin was having an affair with Margaret Elliott. And I don't know why, it just kept popping into my head. I'm not saying, I've got no proof of anything like that. And because apparently there was a big thing about trying to matchmake with Jane Asher and Paul McCartney. And
Well,
so
yeah.
would it surprise you if he was the father of Jane Asher? Is what I'm trying to say.
Nothing surprises me,
No, I know it does.
seriously,
Yeah,
at,
yeah.
at this point. And it's interesting because in the memoirs of Billy Shears, it explains to us that George Martin had a keen interest in Paul McCartney dating Jane Asher.
Well, I've never read the book, so
Yeah, so that's mentioned
yeah,
in the book,
yeah.
and which is, when I read that, I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Why does the producer of a band, why does he have such an interest
Yes.
in one of his artists having a relationship or being in a relationship with Jane Asher? So, and it's starting to kind of come together now as to why, because they're all working together.
Yes. Yeah. The pieces are in place. Someone knows the ancestry lines up with Paul 1, the first Paul, his ancestry. When that finishes, then obviously they've got to break
Yeah,
because it doesn't match up anymore. But so Port Elliot, the title of the Earls of Saint Germain, or Germans, is in the village of Saint Germain in Cornwall, and it's the earldom, and it's got another title as well, the Baron Elliot. So they don't just get one title; they get several titles throughout handed to them, and their offspring might take the barony, another one will take the earldom, etc., etc. And that place there, that picture, that castle or stately home, has got 1,730 acres with it. Which is 700 hectares, and it was sold. The current owner is Prince William, Duke of Cornwall.
mm.
Of that now, yeah,
Mm.
the Duchy of Lancaster. Yeah, so that's the close tie. Another a bit of evidence of close ties to the royal family.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
yep.
but a lot. Yeah, so I'll go to the next one because I know you've. So this is T.S. Eliot, and they're related to a lot of these famous business people, the Eliot family. So they've got a Canadian angle, they've got the US angle, they've also got a European angle as well. They're a prominent American family hailing from Massachusetts and Boston and Harvard University. Some of them are like what they call the Boston Brahmin class. I don't know if you've heard of that, Mike.
No, no.
That it's sort of like they formed from like a political elite and a financial elite of that area, possibly around the end of the 18th century, 19th century, that time.
It's
Sort of
also
time.
referred to that area, the Eastern elites
Right.
in the United States.
Which is the Kennedys, isn't it? They're Boston elites, aren't they? That type
Yeah,
of family. But yeah, so Margaret Asher's descendants from the Elliot family, the American cousins are all related. So there was Samuel Elliot, a banker. He was a businessman from the Elliot family. He was president of the Massachusetts Bank, etc. So he was one of the he made one of the largest fortunes in Boston at the time, and his daughter married another German guy from Hamburg, a banker called Johann Heinrich Goslar III, owner of Berenbank. So the Elliots are married into all this ancient banking dynasty as well in Germany.
yeah. Like we mentioned, Germany is a hotbed. It's a hub.
So I'll show you one of the. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you one of
Yeah.
that's the coat of arms of the Barenberg family. We'll go to the next one. This guy here, he was Bernard Corinthius Paus, or whatever he's called there. He was an honorary member of the Danish Order of the Freemasons, the Icelandic Order of Freemasons, and the Grand Land Lodge of the Freemasons of Germany. He was also part of the Supreme Council, Scottish Rite, Northern Jurisdiction of the USA, and the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite southern jurisdiction of America. Bernard Corinthius Paus. He was yeah, anyway. Grand Master of the Norwegian Order of Freemasons, he was.
He's got quite a resume.
Just a little bit. And that's a cousin of, or a distant cousin of Jane Asher's. Yeah. So we'll just come to the next one. We'll go back to T.S. Eliot again.
Sure.
There. And I think, I mean, he's the one that I'd heard of, and I'm sure you guys have as well. But T.S. Eliot was a member of the avant-garde promoting the CIA-funded the Congress for Cultural Freedom that we mentioned in our Huxley series. If you remember, Chris, they were publishing books and things like that. Going back to that, how important book publishing is as well, and they were funded by the CIA. So he basically was working for the CIA.
It's interesting because Yoko was knee deep into the avant-garde, and Billy was as well.
I think we can see who's controlling all this stuff.
Yeah.
He was a friend of Bertrand Russell. Was T.S. Eliot? He was Duke of Bedford, and the Duke of Tavistock was Bertrand Russell.
Bertrand Russell.
Yeah, the Duke of Tavistock.
I think it was Bertrand Russell. The quote was that the objective is to convince people that snow is black.
Was that him? Was it?
I think it was him. And then he had said that, but if we can get them to believe that it's gray, how cost effective is that? In other words, it doesn't matter whether it's black or gray. They believe that snow is not white. So I believe that was his quote.
Well, it's working, because if you point to chemtrails and stuff like that in the sky, people say, "Oh no, they're not. There's clouds."
Yeah, or that men can have babies and breastfeed. That's another example, right?
Oh, damn! You mean tell me they can't? Apparently, Paul met Russell at Wimpole Street after an introduction by the Ashers.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He claimed that it was Russell who turned him on to what was going on in Vietnam, and as a consequence, he told Lennon, who then started to go into the whole peace thing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm starting to see when I start doing this, and when I'm reading back through it again, I'm starting to think that this old Margaret Asher, just an ordinary little music teacher and musician who by chance taught George Martin's, starting to smell of cows a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just unbelievable to me. I mean, I know I'm quiet here because I'm reading the charts, and as you're going through this, Dom, I'm trying to mentally make sure I keep the connections in place.
Yeah.
But it's folks, if those of you who are watching this and you question that there's an overarching control system, and this should help you to understand that there is, if you have any doubts.
Hopefully by the end of this, there'll be no doubts, but
yeah,
it's well, adding to your work, I mean, it all starts adding together from a different direction. I thought when I were doing something like this, if I were ever going to do anything about anything related to the Beatles, it had to be something totally different.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, how did you get into the Ashers? I just didn't, not that I didn't think about it. It's just that I really wasn't motivated to do so because I was so focused on everything else with the Beatles. But I'm glad you guys, dove into it.
You get channeled in, like we're saying, you get channeled into a certain area,
Yeah.
and you start digging and digging and digging, and you find stuff, don't you? The first one was, ironically, a genealogy, which we will come to at some point. But
okay,
yeah, and we'll go to the next slide if we can. Dr. Richard Asher. A lot's been said about Dr. Richard Asher and his death and things like that, and it was an odd, the strange death. We'll come to that in a sec. I know people will not already know about it. Some of this stuff I understand that people will have already read about and looked into. Hopefully, you're finding some new stuff as well. He was an endocrinologist. He was a hematologist, and his medical career is as interesting as his mysterious death. And the numbers also are interesting. He was a member of the Royal College of Physicians. He was born in Brighton. He's the son of Louise Stern and the Reverend Felix Asher, and educated at Lancing College, a public school. It was via boarding school he went to. Dr. Richard Asher was a consultant in mental diseases, which is I always found a bit strange, because an endocrinologist and a hematologist got nothing to do with mental behaviour. So how he's gone into that side of it, I don't know. And he is portrayed as some kind of expert in mental illness as well. As well as being a broadcaster. He said he was a broadcaster. I never found anything that he'd broadcast anything.
I didn't know that.
No, I didn't either. He was an author of notable medical articles. Yeah, I've got plenty of them. He was also a senior physician responsible for the mental observation ward at the Central Middlesex Hospital. Now, Matt Sergio, we're going to do a bit of a collab, because he's found some interesting stuff that links it sort of like, it looks like the British arm of MK Ultra.
I was just going to say, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
ringing bells, in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the people that were born at this hospital around about the time when he worked there was a guy called Patrick McKay, who was a British serial killer. I found that I haven't looked into that side of it, but again, if they're doing things that we think they're doing at these places, and they're churning out babies that have been anyway programmed.
Well, when the time is right, let me know, and I'll tell you a little story that's, again, in memoirs, that tells us about how Richard Asher was applying hypnosis to Paul McCartney.
Right, yeah. Well, we'll come
When
down to
we
the
get there.
hypnosis part, and then that story there.
Okay.
We have some evidence that Dr. Richard Asher and other colleagues were part of Tavistock. I think we've seen that here. That's where I think we've seen with this. He came up and described and named Munchausen syndrome. I don't know if you heard about that. It's basically a fictitious disorder that is. So it's a bit like being a hypochondriac, but you're acting out the part that you're ill in depth with, like, validation, and you're looking for sympathy. And it was named after Baron Munchausen, fictional German nobleman, created by Rudolf Erich Rasp, who also wrote a treatise on Bishop Thomas Percy. I hope that everyone's listening to these names, because Percy is related to the Percy family. So he named Munchausen syndrome, a fictitious disorder where people think they're sick, right, after Baron Munchausen, that was written by a guy who also wrote about the Percy family.
Yeah. And so the audience is probably familiar on my end that Stacy's work has tied Billy's family tree back to the Percy family as well, on his mother's side of the family. So I'll just leave it there, because I don't want to steal any thunder. But yeah,
we're not going to steal anything. It's all linking in. That's what the big part about it is.
Yeah.
So the Percy family, aka the Earls of Northumberland, it was Lord Percy, who we're going to talk about in a moment, who headed up the Percy Commission. And I'll leave it at that for the time being. I'm not going to bring any dates in there or anything, because the dates match up with all the other numbers that we've been talking about. So the difference between hypochondriacs and people with Munchausen syndrome is that people with Munchausen syndrome may be skilled at deceiving medical professionals, while people with hypochondria may be resistant to reassurance and may, I'm reading this out by the way, may continue to worry about their health despite medical reassurance. That's the two differences.
Okay.
Now, that tells me that they're actually doing experiments on people to find this out.
Yeah.
Because how many people is going to come in with Munchausen syndrome to a hospital?
Yeah. And that's what Tavistock was all about.
Yeah. Which, if you wind that onto 2020, and how many people became hypochondriacs? So this is your sort of your expertise, this, Mike, isn't it? This next bit. He wrote a paper called "Respectable Hypnosis," did Dr. Asher, and he wrote it on February the 11th, 1956.
February 11th. Okay, 1956.
Respectable Hypnosis, and I'll read this out. This part. If you read the paper, look at the heading: the state of hypnosis, right? If you find that, if you look up respectable hypnosis, a PDF, you can read it on it, and tell me if it sounds like Manchurian Candidate programming. Under deep hypnosis, the subject automatically obeys any suggestions made by the hypnotist. For instance, if you suggest that he cannot move, he is virtually paralyzed. But if you suggest that he can move, then he does so. If you suggest that he will obey only your requests, then others can command him in vain. But if you suggest that he will obey other people, then he will be obedient to them. Those phenomena, which can be induced under deep hypnosis, include paralysis, rigidity, anesthesia, automatic obedience, delusions, post-hypnotic suggestion, and post-hypnotic amnesia. So he wrote this paper, and that's a section of that paper that out of it, and you've probably heard that before.
I have a copy of the paper. Now, let me just explain. As you mentioned, Dom, I do have some expertise in this area. I was a certified master hypnotherapist. I was 12 years of private practice, and I was also an instructor for almost a decade. What he just discussed there can only happen, those types of results can only happen after repetitive sessions. In other words, somebody's got to be in a program. Because if you just bring somebody in for hypnosis and you put them into trance for an hour and a half, you typically cannot make somebody do something that they don't want to do. Their subconscious mind will cut it off and say, no, I'm not going to do that. In fact, we used to always say, people would ask me, they'd say, they'd find out that I was a hypnotherapist and they'd say, oh, are you going to make me bark like a dog? I said, not unless you want to.
Yeah.
So when he talks about these types of results in this paper, they will only obey the person that the hypnotherapist tells them to obey. They will only do this. They will only do that. That tells me that this is somebody that is in a long-term program, which means to me, it's not just hypnosis that's taking place. So there could be electric shock, there could be sensory deprivation, there could be drugs involved. So if I had to take a guess, and again, to me, because of my experience, it's an educated guess, he's talking about the results of somebody being in a mind control program.
And I think me and Matt Sergio have been sending each other information. He's linked him back to a guy, I forget his name now, I think it was called Sargent, who worked at the Maudsley Hospital. The Maudsley Hospital in London was another mental institution. Actually, Boris Johnson's mother went there, didn't she, Chris?
Yeah, I was thinking that,
Yeah, and she was electrocuted and reprogrammed. Yeah.
This is like the work of Ewan Cameron.
Yes. Well, Dr. Sargent was friends with Ewan Cameron. That's the link. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And he was a mentor. He was a mentor to Asher.
Yeah. Unbelievable. I mean, it's so twisted on so many levels.
I actually think when I was doing this, and me and Matt talked about this, when we were doing this, when I was doing this part of the research, I actually thought you're actually seeing the British arm of, I know it's Tavistock, but you're actually seeing it in operation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so his paper really what it's doing is it's normalizing, right? This is their way of normalizing it and playing it down. And the average person would look at that and, just not really understand what's really going on behind the scenes in order to get those results.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, again, it's a program. He's discussing people who are in a mind control program.
And who better to practice on than people who are, and it's happened over and over again, people who are mentally ill, people who are susceptible to these treatments, they're the ones that practice on, don't they?
Yeah, well, Tavistock got started by claiming that they were going to help soldiers from World War I who were shell-shocked.
Yeah.
So what they did from after World War I is they had an immediate base of inventory of patients or subjects that they can experiment with.
And they were willing subjects because they wanted to get better.
They wanted to get better.
Yeah.
Right. So some guy comes in a white coat and, and you're like, okay.
Yeah. And fries the brain.
There's the trust, right? That's how that's how everything works.
Mm.
You know, they have you trust the system, and then the system then breaches that trust, and most people still don't figure it out after the
Yeah.
trust has been breached. But yeah,
And isn't it strange that we've gone from sort of talking about the Beatles and stuff, now we're on to something really dark there, aren't we?
yeah,
That subject there. Did you say you had something in the book, Billy Shear's book, about Paul
yeah.
McCartney and Asher?
So Paul McCartney, or Billy, has told a story a number of times where he says that the song Yesterday came to him in a dream. And he has a dream and he has the melody. And then when he wakes up, he's got this song milling around in his head. And the way the story goes is he went to different people. I think George Martin was one of them, and said, "Hey, you know, I've got this song in my head. Does it sound familiar to you? Is this a song that you recognize?" And everybody's saying, "No, no, 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 no." So, so he's telling us the song came to him in a dream, or came to Paul in a dream, if the story's even true. But let's just take it at face value, right? In Memoirs, it explains that when Paul McCartney lived at the Ashers, he had a bedroom with a piano in the bedroom. In fact, Billy talks about this as well. When he goes back and tells the tales from yesteryear, he says that there was a piano in the room. Memoirs tells us that Richard Asher would put Paul McCartney into trance, into hypnosis. Then Margaret Asher would play the piano. And the melody that she was playing was Yesterday. And so the post-hypnotic suggestion that Richard Asher gave to Paul McCartney while he was in trance is that you're going to remember the melody and nothing else. You're not going to remember Margaret Asher playing the piano. You're just going to remember the song. And that's in the book. Now, again, my experience is that if I did that, if I put somebody into trance and, you know, we played the piano, would they remember the melody? They would. All of it, maybe, but would they also have some recall of other things going on in the room? Yes, that could actually be. That could happen. So if the story that Memoirs tells us, and actually the story that Billy tells us about yesterday coming to him or Paul in a dream is true, that tells me that it's possible that Paul McCartney was in a mind control program. Because in order to get those, again, in order to get those types of results, there's got to be a situation where the person goes into very, very, very deep trance, very deep. And the way somebody goes into very deep trance is there has to be multiple sessions. I used to explain to my clients that the more hypnosis sessions you have, the more acclimated you become to the process, and the deeper you go into trance. The deeper you go into trance, the higher the odds, much higher, of achieving the results that you're looking for. Because what happens is, as you go into very, very deep trance, the conscious mind, which is a gatekeeper, leaves the room. And now the hypnotist is just working with the subconscious mind. Now, for the work I was doing, I was helping people with public speaking, self-confidence, quit smoking, release weight, those types of things. You don't have to have somebody in deep, deep, deep trance to get that stuff done. And you get them in there's four hypnosis states. There's beta, which is your waking state. There's alpha, which is a light trance state. That's the trance state that people are in when they're watching television, watching a movie, reading a book, when you're in class and the teacher's writing on the board. There's theta, which is a deep trance state. Those are the types of trance states we have very deep meditation, past life regressions, those types of experiences. And then fourth is delta. Delta would be sleep. So most clients, when you bring them into a hypnosis session, they will dip in under the alpha state. You want to try to get them in theta, but it's the upper it's the upper tier or the upper end of theta. But to get somebody into such a deep state, there has to be multiple sessions, and they have to be a good subject for trance. Some people are just not good subjects or clients to put into trance. You can get them in, you might get them into a very light trance state. When you have light trance states, somebody can only get into like alpha or deep alpha. You have to have multiple sessions in order to try to get the client to realize their objectives. In other words, they want to lose weight, quit smoking, stop vaping, be a better public speaker, and so on.
So,
But
so
this type,
suppose,
this type of
sorry,
stuff here, we're talking about, a whole different level of depth of trance.
and intention as well. It's totally different. Stopping, having a positive effect of someone stopping smoking is a difference of having a positive effect of what they'll be talking about with McCartney.
Yeah, and a big piece of it, Dom, is trust, right? So when people came to see me, one of the things that you do when you pre-talk is to build a rapport with your client so that they trust you, that you're going to guide them through this process and they're going to get help. In this case here, Paul McCartney, in all likelihood, he had total trust in the
Yeah,
ashes.
or he was. I mean, Dr. Asher was a mental doctor, so he will have access to drugs and things like that as well.
That's what I was saying before about a
yeah.
possible mind control program. So if there were drugs involved, obviously, that's
Takes it to a different level.
takes it
When you
to a different
listen
level.
when you listen to them SRA survivors, satanic ritual abuse survivors, I've heard some of them say that it's the way they get them into it. It's methodical and technical. There's no adapting to each personality. It works immediately on everybody.
Yeah.
The system that they use, the torture and whatever systems they use, it just works. So,
Yeah. Well, that's because when people say mind control is hypnosis is mind control, I always correct them. I said, no, hypnosis is one of the tools in the toolbox of a mind control program. Because there could be physical and mental trauma, sensory deprivation, drugs, electric shock. All of these things come into play when you have a mind control program, because the objective is to totally break that person's mind down. I think it was you and Cameron called it pattern repattern.
So now the Alice in Wonderland, Jane Asher in that film becomes more than just her acting in a film, doesn't it? It has to be.
Yep. It gets, now you're leaning into you're leaning into a level now where you've peeled the outer layer off. And Alice in Wonderland is not just a kid's story anymore.
Yeah. And it's not just luck that she's actually ends up acting in it.
Yeah.
I'm sure from that story you told us there, Mike, about yesterday, they can't have resisted putting some of the clues in that film they made yesterday, where
the guy that went into a different reality.
Yeah.
I did a video on that.
Yeah.
And that was clearly, that movie was clearly depicting the Beatles and Paul McCartney being replaced.
Yeah. I haven't watched it, but we'll watch it.
Yeah,
it makes you wonder.
I watched it.
Yeah,
it was okay. But you have to go in with an understanding of the conspiracy, because once you understand the conspiracy, even at a pretty basic level, you can understand what it is that they were depicting in that movie. The guy that went into a different reality and was playing the Beatles songs, he was Billy. So anyway.
Yeah.
Richard Curtis made that, no? Richard Curtis.
Yeah. Next slide. Let's talk about Dr. Asher a little bit. I didn't want to spend too much time on him, but he's a fascinating subject, to be honest with you. His family's fascinated as well. He actually went missing a few years before he actually turned up dead in his cellar. He went missing around about 1963, 64 as well, it was around about the time that McCartney had moved in, and apparently went missing because of all the people queuing up outside the house, all that nonsense. It sounds like a nonsense story, to be honest with you, and
Yeah.
it stressed him out that much. But it also coincided with him leaving his job. So he left his job at the hospital. He suddenly gave up his job at the hospital. He was sort of kicked out, apparently, and he started working from home because he had his doctor's practice at home as well. Yeah, so in the press, his son Peter, who McCartney apparently wrote a song for, didn't he? I mean, anyway, he said that it was because of the stress of McCartney living there.
Yeah, retraining.
Yeah, retraining. So he left home. Left his job at the hospital to spend more time at home programming the McCartney one.
It was the precursor to working from home.
Yeah. So
He was a trendsetter.
yeah, yeah. So yeah. Anyway, that's that bit. I don't really want to jump into too much of that story. But when he died, he went missing, and then they found him a week later in the basement. And the basement is where, again, that's got connotations as well, hasn't it? Because Alice in Wonderland was down in a rabbit hole, if you like, in the basement, and he was apparently taught. Was he taught piano in one of the rooms in the basement, or he did something in the basement? McCartney, I'm sure.
I don't know. I know that
Yeah.
the piano bit in the bedroom. I don't know about the
Yeah,
basement.
there was something in the basement that he did as well. But again,
So
yeah,
he went missing for 5 days, right? Is that the story? Like,
that's
and
the story. Yeah,
and they found him
yeah.
in the basement. So
Yes.
nobody bothered to look in the basement.
Yeah, nobody
For
bothered
5
to look in the
days?
basement. Yeah, for 5 days. Yeah,
Yeah, that story makes absolutely no
aged
sense
50,
whatsoever.
aged 57.
57 years old. There's the
Yeah,
5 and a 7 again.
Yeah. On the 27th, on 25th of April, which is 7 and 5 again. No, 7 and 4. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, so I find this a bit hard to believe, where the journalists were insinuating that he was not happy about his children and what they'd been up to, and that's why he committed suicide. I think you could read into that he probably knew a little bit more or a little too much, and he was suicided.
That could be. Or he got to a point where he had self-reflection about perhaps what the entire family was involved in. That could be
It reminds
too.
me of the other MK Ultra story. Was it the American Olson? Was it Lieutenant Olson who
Yeah.
accidentally flew out of a window?
Yeah. They dosed him with LSD.
Maybe he got too panicky and had to be
Yeah.
let go, so to speak.
Yeah, they said either he was on a trip or somebody flung him off the balcony.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
think
family still trying to sue. I think apparently, Mike.
yeah, it was probably them throwing him off the balcony.
But there's a book written after his death. The next slide, if you want, Mike. I'll jump forward onto this. This was written by a lot of his peers, if you like, about 4 or 5 years after he died in 1972, called Dr. Asher Talking Sense. So it's all about they basically printed his papers and given like a synopsis of his work. And I've actually got that book. I mean, it's not an interesting book to read, but the people who were doing the forwards and stuff like that are the interesting part. Forward was written by a guy called Max Leonard Rosenheim, or Baron Rosenheim, KBE, who was knighted as well, and he's a British physician, born in Germany. He's from Würzburg, Germany. That's where his family's from. Yeah, and he was in the Royal Army Medical Corps in 1941. So he was part of the in World War II Allied land forces. The other one is Sir Francis Avery Jones, a Welsh physician. So all these people working with him, as you can see, another one, Sir Francis Fraser. He was good friends with Abraham Flexner, who worked for the Rockefellers. Blah blah blah. The Flexner Report is a world famous Flexner Report that basically changed medicine. He actually did a talk for Flexner he was part of the Flexner Report. Was this guy who was one of Richard Asher's friends? Yeah. Do we need to say any more?
No, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. The next one, if that wasn't interesting enough, right? So, this bit sent me. I had to step away for a bit because sometimes you get research and it gets a bit too much for you. But the Royal Commission on the law relating to mental illness and mental deficiency. It was started in 19. What's the date again?
57.
Yeah. When Stacey did her presentation for her research on your show, showing the Scottish lineage, she mentioned the Percy family and the Earls of Northumberland, and they've popped up during this research as well. Firstly, through the Royal Commission for the Law and Mental Illness and Mental Deficiency, it was set up to review the existing framework or governing detention and care of people with mental illness. So to me, that sounds like, it sounds very nice and, we're going to look after people, but it also sounds like one of those cover terms that they use to cover up something else, if you ask me. So in 1957, Dr. Richard Asher contributed to this Royal Commission by writing a memorandum titled Mental Observation Wards. So he was writing his, I think, if you go to the next slide, you can see there, that's the information there on the right-hand side is the part that Dr. Asher wrote there. You can actually read it if people want to read it. It reminded me of the Ken Kesey story. Can you remember he was working in a mental ward and they were actually doing MK Ultra there. It was a veterans ward, I think. And he partook in the MK Ultra. They were giving it LSD, weren't they? But that ward sounds like that to me. And then he went on to write One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest, Chris.
Yeah, One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah. Ken Kesey, and did the acid tests and the Grateful Dead stuff. So yeah, he wrote in 1957. Just to backtrack, Dr. Asher contributed to the Royal Commission on Mental Illness by writing a memorandum entitled Mental Observation Wards. What that shows to me is that he was highly thought of within a group of people.
Absolutely.
To get onto this was called the Percy Commission so it was shortened. So that title I gave you there, the mental, whatever is it, Act of Mental, whatever it is, I can't remember, Mental Illness and Mental Deficiency, was also known as the Percy Commission.
Okay.
All right. So I did a bit of looking on the Percy family. If you go to the next slide, and the family tree of the Percy family, as Stacey worked on, is very interesting. But the Sir Henry de Percy, first Baron of Alnwick Castle spelled Alnwick, but I think it's pronounced Alnwick Castle in Northumberland. This is round about circa 1270s, so quite a long time ago. This will be Jane's 19th great-grandfather.
Okay, so this is the linkage now back to the Percy family, the Percy bloodline. Okay.
Yeah. He would also be a great-grandfather of the man Dr. Asher was working for on the Percy Commission as well. So now Jane's actually related to the guy that's running the Percy Commission, who Dr. Richard Asher is writing that memorandum for. And the Elliots are related to that family.
Okay.
By blood. Yeah. And that's these are twists that you come across, and the connection with what Stacey did as well sort of validates what she was doing if she needed validation, but it sort of revalidates it as well, doesn't it? It adds more weight to what she was saying, is what I'm trying to say, I suppose.
No, this is great because this is connected right into what Stacey presented. And, I tell folks that I thought Stacey's work was very compelling, but to have you guys then take a look at it from a different angle, completely different angle, and see it converge is even more compelling.
Yeah. And the next one we'll come to is I think that it's the lady that she was speaking about. Elizabeth Douglas Hamilton. She's the
wife
she.
of Douglas Hamilton.
That's right. Yeah, she's a Percy, isn't she? That's right.
Yes.
She, and this is where her royal genealogy comes to it. And so that's her back to King Charles, King Stuart, Charles Stuart II, King of Britain. Yeah.
Right. So for the audience, if you look at the bottom of the chart, the far right, the image of that lady, Stacy's work, going back, I guess, about a year ago or so, I lose track of time. This would be conceivably, if Stacy nailed it, and I tend to think she did, would be Billy's mother.
Yes. Yeah. Elizabeth Percy, 1916 to 2008. That's the lady that Stacey mentioned. She was married to Douglas Hamilton, 14th Duke of Hamilton. Elizabeth Percy, or Elizabeth Percy, Duchess of Hamilton, was the daughter of Alan Ian Percy, 8th Duke of Northumberland, and Lady Helen Magdalen Gordon Lennox, right name that, isn't it? And we'll find that the Gordon part of that name, the Ashes are also, well, the Elliot family are also related to that family as well. Probably on the next slide. But Lady Helen Gordon Lennox married name became Helen Percy when she married into the Northumberland family on the 18th of October 1911. And they've also, yeah, I think the Lennox part, I traced Annie Lennox. I think I told Mark about this, but he didn't have time.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, Annie Lennox traces back to that aristocratic lineage as well.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's a bit freaky, isn't it, when you start seeing it in the cold light of day. The next slide, please, Mike. So I'm on 26 there.
It's 20. That's
Just
26.
trip back one. Sorry,
20,
I've missed something out there. Just trip back one. Sorry.
26.
Yeah, 26. Yeah, a good example is Charles Henry Gordon Lennox, 7th Duke of Richmond, and he's also the 2nd Duke of Gordon, the father of Helen Percy, Elizabeth Percy's mother. The Charles line has a green line running through it there, and in keeping with the Masonic links, Charles Henry Gordon Lennox, 7th Duke of Richmond, 2nd Duke of Gordon, was the Grand Master of the Sussex branch of the Freemasons from 1902.
Okay.
So this line is that isn't just I was a Mason. The Grand Master of the Sussex branch is, I would have envisaged with my limited Masonic knowledge, is pretty high up.
It's just Sussex is a county, it's not a town, is it?
And what's also interesting is we have Alan Ian Percy and Lady Helen Magdalen Percy.
That's right. Yeah.
That would be Elizabeth's mother and father, right?
Yes.
So Billy has the song Helen Wheels.
Right. Who's writing this script? Someone is.
Like I said earlier, we talked about how, the planning and the strategy to place people in certain positions at certain times and places it's really extraordinary. And again, if you're watching this and you think it's a coincidence, I just click the off button, go find something else to do.
Yeah.
Because this is not coincidence.
No. In that image there, that's a line back from the Percy family, back from the Ashers actually. Jane Asher, she's related. You can see there the line from Jane Asher through the Elliots all the way down to Sir Henry de Percy. That's one of the sort of gene lines that I put together, showing that they are actually directly related. And then the next one shows Elizabeth's royal connections. And I'm not going to read them all out because she's related to all them royal family members there.
Elizabeth
all the way down.
All the way down.
Elizabeth is all the way down to King Fulk, King of Jerusalem. Okay. And I'm not even. Is it Charlemagne? Charlemagne. I always get grief for it's my Yorkshire English accent, but yeah, there's a lot of royal family members there. And I think I heard you and Mark talking about
We have
on your
we have the
podcast.
Townsends, or is that related to the Townsends, or like Pete?
Pete Townsend might be.
Oops, sorry. I just saw that and I was wondering about that as well.
I've not looked into anybody from there, but Pete Townsend or any of them guys.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
But we came back with the John Lennon. He's related to the Fleetwood family, and there's an area near Blackpool in England that's called Fleetwood that was named after their barons. So John Lennon, part of his did his genealogy before Christmas, and he's related to the ancient kings of Wales. But then we got on to Mick Fleetwood, and Mick Fleetwood his father was the wing commander for NATO. But anyway, we're going down a different road there.
So John Lennon, and you're saying that John Lennon and Mick Fleetwood have
could possibly
have
possibly, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Possibly, but anyway. So yeah, next slide. We'll go on to this one. Otherwise, the Sinclair bloodline. Elizabeth Percy also descends from the Sinclair bloodline. I mentioned it earlier. They were the builders of the Roslin Chapel that featured in the film with Tom Hanks in, etc. And the Sinclairs are the ones that descend from King Robert of Scotland and Robert the Bruce and all these other people, famous people. And they were Knights Templar, the Sinclairs. And they were part of the writing of the Scottish Rites of Freemasonry. William Sinclair of Roslin was the first Grand Master Mason of Scotland. And these are direct bloodlines. Trudeau's a direct bloodline of this family, this side as well.
Okay, so the Percys, yeah, they're swimming in blue blood.
These people aren't just they own a castle. You know, these people are high up there. I mean, the Sinclairs. He was the first Grand Mason of Scotland. He was elected to the Grand Lodge of Scotland and wrote the Sinclair Charters in 1601, and which documents the statements that were made to the operative Masons of Scotland and has conferred upon the family of the Sinclairs of Roslin. Anyway, it's part of the Scottish Rites. They basically wrote it. So if that is Billy's mother, that would be his ancestry.
It would also explain all of his allegiance and his ties back to Scotland.
Yeah.
Right, the song Mull of Kintyre.
Yeah. Well, we're going to show that. I don't know. It might be the second one, but in the second, that Jane Asher's royal Scottish lineage ruled over the area of Kintyre.
Oh my God, you cannot make this stuff up.
That freaked me out, I've got to say. It freaks me out. So we'll just go to the next slide there. The Percy Lodge. So, yeah, the next one, slide 30, I think it is, Mike. Yeah, there you go. 1427. Make of that number what you want. So this is the Percy Lodge. It was, again, it's the Percy Lodge. It's their lodge.
Yeah.
The Percy family, they're not just Masons, they have their own lodge. Number 1407. So Lord Percy was the provincial Grand Master of the province of Northumberland, who was initiated into Freemasonry as Lord Warkworth, named after Warkworth Castle. The Percy held other aristocratic titles as well. He was initiated into the Apollo University Lodge, number 357 in Oxford, on the 12th of February 1866, along with Prince Albert Edward, the future King of England. Secondly, here's some Masonic terminology I got from their actual website. It states that Lord Warkworth was passed on the 9th of March and raised on the 24th of April the same year.
He was what?
Passed. I'm presuming that means there was an initiation.
Okay.
Yeah, that he moved from being whatever, a normal human through to reincarnation as Thirdly, Lord Warkworth became a joining member of the Westminster and Keystone Lodge number 10 in London in 1867, where he served as Worshipful Master. And fourthly, in 1886, Lord Warkworth joined Alnwick Lodge in number 1167 Lodge, that is, where he served as Worshipful Master as well there. Remember, he lived at Alnwick Castle, so Alnwick Lodge would be another one of his lodges.
Okay.
I haven't finished there. Lord Warkworth, this would be, who did I say this was in relation to Elizabeth? I think this was her great-grandfather, is it? Or uncle? Anyway, this is a direct descendant of Elizabeth. Lord Warkworth would be the Grand Master from Provincial Grand Master and the Senior Grand Warden of the United Grand Lodge of England. That is the highest echelon you can actually get to.
Yeah. This is impressive, Dom.
It's scary if you ask me.
It's impressively scary. This is very, very good. It's a lot of work.
What I want to bear in mind is that these people who own this lodge, or lodgers as he's there, they were the ones that Dr. Richard Asher wrote that memorandum for in 1957, the Percy Commission. When you put all this on top of that now, you start seeing who is he working for, or was he working for, and whose path did he cross to end up in his cellar?
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, anyway. Are you all right for time, Mike? Or
Yeah, go ahead. You know what? Let's go. Let's push it to 45 more minutes. 3:30.
Yeah. If we go to the cast of characters, I think that's the next one down there. I've added Jane Asher to that one. You put this together, I think, didn't you?
I put this together based upon Stacy's work, because she had all these different cast members, and I was trying to make sense out of them. So I put this chart together as an immediate circle of family around Billy. So she had deducted that his real name is William Alfred Douglas Hamilton. His father was Douglas Hamilton, and his mother, as we have just discussed, was Elizabeth Ivy Percy, or Elizabeth Ivy Douglas Hamilton, when she married Douglas. And then below that, to the left, would be the Douglas Hamilton mother and or Douglas Hamilton's parents, or Billy's grandparents on his father's side, and then to the right would be his grandparents on his mother's side, on the Percy side.
Yeah, well, Alexander Hamilton, the 10th Duke of Hamilton, became a Knight Garter, and he also held the office of Grand Master Mason of the Freemasons of Scotland as well. Yeah. And for the listeners out there, I can back this up. I mean, if you just go to Wikipedia and look this guy up, it tells you on his Wikipedia page he was the Grand Master of Freemasons of Scotland.
Yeah. Hey, Billy, if you're listening to this, do us a favor. Just do a little masterful speaking and let us know if we're on the right track here.
There's a lot of Masons surrounding him. And the next picture, if you just go to the next picture there, I mean, the checkerboard flooring tells you it all, but that's the current Duke, Hamilton. Yeah. That would be a nephew of Billy's, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's the checkerboard floor. That's always a giveaway.
Yeah. The next slide, we'll come to the Earls of St. Germain as well, because I mentioned before that it's a right beard that guy's got on it. That these guys also had their own lodges, and so they've got Masonic connections. They're up to the necks in it, and that's Sir John Eliot, that the guy with the fancy beard. That's where they live. That's their coat of arms. I don't think you've got a coat of arms, have you, Mike? I know I haven't.
Not that I'm aware of.
I actually looked to see if I could find any evidence that Richard Asher was a Mason. I couldn't find any he was a. I couldn't find any evidence, but he was a. There's sort of like a medical Masonic lodge. It's called the Association of Medical, University, and Legal Lodges.
He
Called
had to
a
be.
MUL.
He had
Yeah,
to be, Tom. In order to be where he was positioned, he had to be. He
yeah.
had to be
Certainly,
linked in.
yeah. There was somewhere he had to be linked in. Let's
Yeah.
go to the next one. This will be the one that sort of like the finishing. The Elliot Lodge 1164. That is their lodge. That is Margaret Asher's family's lodge down in
Okay.
Cornwall. And that's from their either Facebook page or website page. Margaret Asher's family were Masons. The Elliot Lodge 1164. There's the numbers again. One had 4 is 5, one had 6 7. The Elliot Masonic Lodge is in St. Germain's
Yeah.
and was consecrated on the 12th of June 1867. And the first worshipful master was Lord Elliot, aka Edward Granville Elliot, 3rd Earl of St. Germain. He was the great grandfather times 3 of Jane Asher.
Yeah. So 1164 is 12, 57 is 12, reduces down to 3. So we keep seeing the 12, 3 numbers crop up.
MC Elliot, aka Montague Charles Elliot, the 8th Earl of St. Germain, a great uncle of Jane Asher's, who was the son of Lord Elliot. He'd be the 3rd great grandfather we just mentioned. He was the most recent worshipful master of the Elliot Lodge, and he was M.R.V. Elliot. I was struggling for the name, but they've shortened the names. That's what they do a lot of the time. They hide the names so you can't work it out, and it takes you a bit a while to unravel it all. Yeah, so there are quite a few of them that went on to become an old prestigious officers, like the Page of Honour to His Majesty the King George the Fourth between 1934 and 1940. That's a ceremonial position within the royal household, as well as being the worshipful master of the Elliot Lodge. They were also married into the Cornwallis family. I don't know if you remember the Cornwallis family. You know that Mel Gibson film? What was it called? Where the Patriot. When they were fighting in the Revolution, when they were American Revolution, where they were fighting.
Oh, yeah. I forgot
yeah,
the name of the movie. Yeah.
is it called the Patriot?
Yeah.
Might be called the. And
Yeah, it's
he
Patriot.
whistled his dogs, and the dogs came out that guy's fort. Well, that was General Cornwallis. They're actually Margaret Elliot is related directly to that guy who was in that castle, the real General Cornwallis.
Okay.
He would be one of his. The Sir Charles Cornwallis, aka Second Marquess Cornwallis. Yeah, and the Gordon family. So what we're finding now is, if we go to the next one, the Clan Gordon and Dukes of Gordon, these again are part of the Elliot family, and these are up to their necks in Masonic. I mean, if you look at just how that building's designed, I mean, in the right hand corner, is it the left hand corner looking at it?
Right here?
Yeah,
It's like an
it
owl.
looks like- yeah.
Looking at owl's face with the ears at the top.
Yeah.
Yep, it looks like
the
an
crown.
owl.
Yeah.
Got the ears up here, got the eyes.
Yeah. Some
Well,
work got into that to make it
That's
like
Gordon
an owl.
Castle, is that? In Morrisshire in Scotland, who were also Masons. Lady Louisa's brother was the General George Gordon, 5th Duke of Gordon. He was a Freemason and was Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. The Grand Lodge of ancient free and accepted Masons of Scotland, and it was the governing body of Freemasonry in Scotland. So these are grandparents of Jane Asher, great grandparents. Yeah.
Wow, she has
There's that many lodges. It's
Scottish as well. They're the daddies, aren't they?
yeah, they're the daddies.
I mean, her bloodline is unbelievable.
It's off the charts.
I don't know what you mean, Mike. This just looks like mine and Dom's photo album, family photo album. Just saving it.
Yeah. Yeah, but all of these. I mean, Clan Gordon. It was obviously an ancient Scottish clan as well. the chiefs of these were also marquesses and dukes and things like that as well. Just go to the next slide there. We'll go to the Cornwallis family. And that's the Cornwallis Lodge. And that's the General Cornwallis who was in the film The Patriot with the red coat on. And that's their lodge in Kent, in England. So how many lodges is that now that they actually have named after them that is directly linked to that Elliot family? I think there's about there's definitely 5.
I was going to say 4 or 5. I'm off the top of my head.
In all the research I've done, I've never come across where so many people are surround them who are, have we, Chris, who are Masons.
No, I've never seen that many far.
So the Cornwallis family, he's one of the guys here. Let me find his name. Fiennes Stanley Wykeham Cornwallis, 1st Baron Cornwallis. He was a Conservative politician, great-great-grandson of the 5th Earl Cornwallis. The Stanley Wykeham Masonic Lodge, number 6599, was named for him. So
6599 is a representation of 119.
Right. So he served as Provincial Grand Master of East Kent until his death in 1982.
Yeah.
That's the most recent one. Yeah. So, and it's a family that pass them down. And then the next one, if you want to go to the next one there, this one I found interesting. So that shows the actual website of Stanley Wykeham Lodge 6599, just as a bit of proof there that it does exist. He served as the United Grand Lodge of England, which is the governing Masonic lodge of all Freemasons in England and Wales, and the Commonwealth of Nations. So Fiennes Cornwallis was the Provisional Grand Master of Kent and the Grand Warden of that, what I've just mentioned there, Oogle or whatever it's called, the United Grand Lodge of England. And these are all... Go on, sorry.
I was just, when you do this work, do you have a program?
Life?
Yeah. I concluded that you do not.
Or a wife.
But how are you tracing this?
Oh man, this one they all start out slightly different. Generally, Chris actually rattles my cage sometimes with some of the stuff. He's the sort of instigator that sort of throws a tidbit out, and I end up taking it.
It's like throwing a bone to a dog.
Yeah. And he calls me the Rain Man, Raymond Babbitt, Charlie Babbitt, the type of thing. But you never know how it's going to turn out, to be honest with you. What you tend to do is, like this one, I'll have you pull a thread away and see if there's anything there. This started out with Jane Asher's genealogy. And once you find her genealogy, then you can look at the individuals that are directly... I don't like looking at cousins that much. I like the direct line back to grandparents. Because, cousins are great, and you can start going into that afterwards. So these are direct lines to grandparents that are related to all these people. So then that leads you to this research, doesn't it? And, yeah. Mark asked me, how do you do that? And I don't know.
Oh, I think...
information.
I'm sorry, Dom, we lost your audio there for a second. Would you...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
is that
it's
better?
okay.
Yeah. And collating all this information together. But there's a hell of a lot of information.
Yeah, it's impressive.
The only person that's I've found who does a similar sort of work is Matt Sergio of the Occult Beatles. Me and him bore Chris to death, I think, with emails.
I should have Matt on the show. I was so knee deep in my own stuff that there's so many people I didn't speak to because of how buried I was with my own research.
Yeah, but now you've come up for air.
Yes, I have. Yeah, doing some hosting versus being the guest and running my mouth. So yeah.
And life takes over, doesn't it? You're a grandparent. I'm a grandparent. It takes over sometimes.
Yes.
Other things become more important. We have to get there, but
you reprioritize.
What's that story my son tells of my grandson, Chris?
Oh, yeah, he's got a little grandkid, and his Dom's son said to me, he had his grandchild there, and he got his phone out, and he thought I was going to take a little photograph of his grandkid, and he aimed it up at Sky and went, "Look at them chemtrails up there."
It's relentless, man.
And I also know his wife's happy that he's in his basement doing his research. Like,
yeah. Yeah, she is. Let's go to the next slide. So this is that Grand Lodge of Ogle, just as I call it Ogle, but the Grand Lodge of England, which is that last guy, the Cornwallis guy. He was he headed that up. He was the deputy Grand Master, I think he was. Anyway, I've lost track myself.
look at that weird coat of arms. I mean, I would say, judging by the hooves, that they're not
Yeah.
actually angels.
You got the Ark of the Covenant above it too, right?
Yeah,
The Ark of the Covenant.
Got the sun there. You've got blooming all sorts going on in that one.
I mean, you could do a full show just on this.
Coats of arms,
Yeah.
Not just on the the lodges that you sort of find. You could do shows just on that alone. But yeah, let's nip to the first. This is another one who was related to the Ashes, the Earls of Enniskillen, which is Irish. Which is going to bring us all the way back to the Beatles and via the Masons and the Earls of Saint Germain. Peregrine was the 10th Earl and was the grandson of Montague Charles Elliot, 8th Earl of Saint Germain, aka the Honourable M.C. Elliot, Worshipful Master of the Grand Elliot Lodge. Peregrine's mother was Ellen Mary Villiers, daughter of Lieutenant Charles Walter Villiers and Lady Catherine Mary Cole. Lady Catherine Mary Cole was the daughter of Laurie Egerton Cole, the 4th Earl of Enniskillen. His father was the 3rd Earl of Enniskillen and served as the first Imperial Grand Master of the Orange Order from 1866 until his death, and he was also the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Ireland from 1846.
See, this just shows the level of influence and power.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the depth of
it. Yes. Yep.
We're nearing the end now. So,
Okay.
the next slide, please. So the Villiers family, who were mentioned there, Lady Catherine Cole, Peregrine's grandfather, right name that, isn't it? Walter Villiers. The Villiers are descended from Thomas Villiers, the 1st Earl of Clarendon. William Villiers, the 2nd Earl of the island of Jersey, and Theophilus Howard, the 2nd Earl of Suffolk. These are directly married into the Plantagenets, Edward IV, actually, Plantagenet. The Villiers family were members of the ancient order of Druids. It is the oldest neo-Druid order in the world. Winston Churchill was also a member at the same time. It's well known that Churchill was also a Mason, initiated into the Studholme Lodge number 1591 in 1901, and became a Master Mason in 1902. Churchill's father was also a Mason, I'll just add to that. Victor Child Villiers, who I just mentioned the Villiers name there, the 7th Earl of Jersey, was initiated into the craft on the 25th of October in the Apollo University Lodge number 357 at the age of 20. God knows what went on. I dread to think what went on there to be initiated at the age of 20. Yeah, and he was passed on into the Churchill Lodge number 458 in February 1866. Again, there's so many of these ties into this. Again, you asked me how I found out. This stuff just appeared. It appeared in future. It's like it were waiting to be found, Mike.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's like a synchronicity. It's for people who don't do research, it's probably hard to understand. But when you do the research, it's amazing how information just comes your way.
And slaps you around the face.
Yep. Yeah.
But this is where it comes back round now. So we're going to come back round.
Okay.
These guys were this Villiers family. They were also appointed the Provisional Grand Master of Oxfordshire. He was Governor of New South Wales. He became the member of the Lodge Iconic number 65 on the 11th of June 1891. He was installed as a Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New South Wales. So this is an Australian links as well. But the next one, the next slide. This is Peregrine Nicholas Elliot, 10th Earl of Saint-Germain. On the death of his father in 1988, Peregrine succeeded him as a 10th Earl. In 1963, around the time Jane and Paul started their relationship and Dr. Asher was doing his disappearing acts for the first time, the future Earl of Saint-Germain and cousin of Jane, so this is Jane's cousin, bear in mind, Peregrine became a partner in the company Celtabe, which is Beatles the other way around.
Right.
The company established to oversee distribution of the Beatles merchandise, set up by Nicky Byrne to exclusively look after merchandising interests on behalf of Brian Epstein, who managed NEMS Enterprises. So what are the odds that Jane Asher's cousin would be one of the people looking after the merchandising of the Beatles? So we've got a mother teaching George Martin, who then produces Paul McCartney, and now her cousin is tying up the Beatles merchandising. There were a lot of arguments about the merchandising, weren't there? Because they got a really poor deal, did the Beatles, by the sound of things.
I was going to say, from what my research, Brian Epstein was stuffing his pockets.
Mm. Yeah. Which is probably why he disappeared quickly.
So
That's
this
insane.
is,
That is fine. That is insane, isn't it?
and and spelling the Beatles backwards is a nod to Crowley's law of reversal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so these are just some of the aristocratic bloodlines as well. I've watered it down a little bit. Yeah, I find it, when it comes back round and all of a sudden you've got her cousin looking after the Beatles merchandising, I mean, that's a proper, if people think this is a coincidence, I mean, it just can't be.
It's almost like the Ashers were totally involved in the manufacturing of the Beatles.
Yeah, good point, Chris, yeah.
It's so indicative of how the control system works, though.
Mm.
It's all tightly knit.
Yeah.
It's
What is the time frame with the 1963 there, Mike, with Beatles?
63 was
What would they been up to
that's
there?
when 63 their first album, UK release, Please Please Me, was released on March 22nd of 63. So that's 322.
Right. So that's really early on in their career that he's setting up the merchandising.
That's early on. And what's interesting is it's early on and they haven't hit the United States yet. So they hit the States on February 7th of 1964. So that's really when Beatlemania really began, in February of 64, when the Beatles came to America to conquer America. That was the tagline. So in 1963, they were really just a UK entity at this point.
But someone thought it was a good idea to make a merchandising company.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be prepared, right, Chris?
Yeah.
I mean, so...
a bit of Crowleyism in there.
I mean, that's more or less that was founded more or less at the outset of the Beatles, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mental. When
you think about it, the Beatles were signed by EMI in June of 1962. So that's only 6 months later. It's 1963.
That's kind of something that goes on now with the merchandising thing, but that must have been brand new at that point.
Yeah, this is like when we had the March 2020 event with masks, and all of a sudden masks were were everywhere like a week later.
Yeah,
mass produced.
Yeah, just happened by accident. Yeah,
it's just an accident. I mean, it's just happened to make masks.
Yeah, somebody just had a container full of masks.
Yeah. This is very, very good.
If you just nip to the last slide, there's a picture there of what I'm sort of trying to write now. So I found an aristocratic link to George Orwell that they share the same great grandfather. Does the Elliot family? Well, Jane and Peter Asher. Yeah, that's King Edward the Third, the one above Orwell. I think that's Edward IV, the next one. And that map there, she's related to. You'll see just above that little pink box, Kintyre in a yellow. Ancient Scottish. Well, they're really Viking, but the Scottish ancestry. They ruled that area in yellow and pink.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the Kingdom of the Isles.
Yeah. And the family links back to Frankfurt, Germany.
Yeah, Dr. Richard Asher's
Yeah.
links back to
Yeah.
Frankfurt, Germany.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's what I'm working on next.
Okay, so when will you have that done? Like next week?
Yeah. Well, most of the information's done. It's just more putting it together. As you know, it takes
That's
a while,
okay.
doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Whenever you're ready, Dom and Chris,
Yeah.
just come back. This is fascinating.
But a lot of the work that Matt's done, Matt Sergiu, sort of ties into this as well. A bit like what some of Stacey's work did with this. Some of Matt's work ties into mine. Like Dr. Asher, he's done a lot of work on the other side of that with the links to Dr. Sargent, who linked to Ewan Cameron and all these people, which ties in then the UK arm of the MK Ultra program. And in a way, you'd say the Beatles were kind of like performing Manchurian candidates.
Oh, yeah.
Possibly. Yeah.
Well, I've always, for a long time, I put forth the theory or the hypothesis that they were in mind control programs.
Mm.
I mean, just the pictures of them with bird cages on their heads that we could find on the internet is pretty good hint that they were in programs. Well, guys, I really appreciate the presentation and the discussion. It's really phenomenal.
Thanks
Yeah,
for
I've
having us on
enjoyed it.
back.
Thanks.
It's
Yeah,
been great.
it's a
Yeah,
real privilege.
and when you're ready, Dom and Chris, for part 2, just let me know,
Well,
and
will do.
we'll
Yeah.
fire it up.